Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brewer fans, welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast with myself, Craig, and joining me, my co-host, Vince. And go Brewers. How's it going, Vince?
Oh, man, it's going great, Craig. How are you? Do we have Scotty and Chad on this podcast, or are they still celebrating at Miller Park?
I think they're still celebrating. They had a pretty long weekend. Chad is probably teaching young school children, actually, at this time, but severely hungover, and Scott is playing games with the elderly. So, they're both doing great things, but they're both massively hungover, and as well as most Brewer fans who had an unbelievable weekend. The Brewers have finally won a playoff series for the first time in 7 years as they've defeated and ended the Chicago Cubs season and won the NLDS and advanced to their fourth ever league championship series. And it's the third one in franchise history, all against teams from the Los Angeles area. Of course, 1982, they played the California Angels, who were based out of Anaheim. And 2018, they also played, and unfortunately lost the National League Championship Series to the Los Angeles Dodgers. And we get a rematch of this year against Shohei Ohtani and the Los Angeles Dodgers, who are coming to to AmFam Field starting tonight, game one of the NLCS. So pretty fired up. Vince, where were you when the Brewers eliminated the Cubs and won this playoff series, and what are your thoughts on this series overall?
Well, hey, quick! Don't forget 2011. We did play in the NLCS that year too, but St. Louis.
Oh yeah, I hired someone to erase that from my brain. Sorry.
Understandable. Okay, where was I? I was watching it in my living room in Houston, Texas. So yeah, I was not anywhere. I got invited to go out and watch the game with a friend. The guy who actually was a pastor friend of mine, who's actually the pastor at my wedding, and I said no. I didn't want to go anywhere. I wanted to be surrounded by creature comforts and be in my own home for this game because it was an emotional roller coaster. If we would have been knocked out of the game, it would have been a pretty devastating evening. And anyways, I just wanted to be with just another Brewer fan, aka my wife, and not have anybody else distracting me from watching the actual game. So yeah, I was just in my living room with my wife.
Awesome. Well, I will say thank you, Brewers, for never trailing in that game, because it would not have been good for my mental health. In fact, even taking it to game 5 wasn't all that great for it. After we won the first 2 games at home and it looked like we were on the cusp of advancing, forcing an elimination game was not something that I was wanting. But wow, what a great night in Milwaukee. I actually got to attend game 2 of the NLDS, and I know that I talked to you a little bit before the start of that, once the Cubs got past the Padres and we knew that they were going to be our opponent for the NLDS, that I had some concerns checking these secondary market tickets of tickets for the NLDS, that the Cubs fans may make somewhat of a 50-50, if not more, split at AmFam Field for the series and kind of negate our home field advantage that we had earned over the course of having the best record in baseball for the regular season. However, I will say I had hand account that that's not how it played out. I don't know if that came through over the television, Vince.
Yeah, I did. I wish I could have been up there in person, obviously, to join you for those games. But no, I watched it all on TV, obviously, and it was clear that it was the majority Brewer fans. We heard from some of our colleagues, like Kurt Hogue from the Journal Sentinel and Adam McKelvey, and they were estimating it was like 70-30 Brewer fans to Cub fans. I think it was maybe McKelvey who said 75-25, so it was everybody that, and then of course talking to you as well. So I think everybody that was reporting on the crowds were definitely giving the edge, not only to Brewer fans and like, oh, it was just, a little over 50-50, but it was a clear, convincing Brewers crowd, which is pretty awesome considering, the proximity of Chicago to Milwaukee and, the reputation that Chicago fans have, and who wouldn't rather watch a game in Milwaukee than at Wrigley Field, and all the stuff that comes into it. So I was really happy. I That was one of my bigger concerns going into the NLDS, as I think we talked about on this podcast, Craig. It was like, do you play so hard all year to earn things like home field advantage, and then to have it, wiped out or minimized by a Cubs crowd would have been pretty devastating. And I think that that was a pretty good tribute and testament to Brewer fans who were not only, willing to turn out, but were willing to turn out and force not to sell their tickets as well. And maintain that home field advantage throughout the NLDS. And I was very pleased. I don't know what it was exactly like in Game 5. I had heard that it was a few more Cubs fans at Game 5 than there were at Games 1 or 2. But it is what it is. I think it was the bottom line is that we still had a clear home field advantage throughout the NLDS.
And that makes sense for Game 5 because I think that they had got a little momentum back and their fans got fired up and were willing to reach deeper in their pockets for sec. But I mean, at Game 2, I would actually say it would beat either of those guys' estimations. I think Game 2, my estimation would have been like an 80-20 split. And by the time we walked out of the stadium, it was like 90-10. And again, most Cubs fans might have left early because we won that game 7-3. But
Yeah.
it was overwhelming, and I was so proud of Milwaukee as a baseball town, and they so deserved.
Yep.
And they got to see so far 3 wins at home in that series, so no one left disappointed. Awesome showing. Thanks for coming out to support this team. This is an amazing, magical team as we run through the postseason here and on to the NLCS, and could not be more fired up. So I want to give them that kudos. Also, here's a question, and I was going to say this for maybe a future Rapid 9 or something, but I'm just going to ask it right now to you, Vince. What was a more important Brewers victory over the Cubs for the franchise? A more important victory,
Mm.
Brewers over Cubs, last game of the season, 2008, or NLDS win in 2025?
You could also add in that 2018 game too to clinch the division, game 163. But
Yeah.
man, that is a really really tough question. So I'm going to answer this year. Actually, I'm going to say it's this year, with the caveat being that 2008, they both got a huge weight off of our back, I think,
Yep.
and obviously 2008 was to get back to the postseason for the first time since 1982. That incredible drought, our formative years as humans were, during the lean years of Brewers baseball in the 90s, quite frankly. And that that magical feeling in 2008 was so special. That being said, I never, and maybe you were different, Craig. But I don't think I think we agree on this. I don't think that any of us necessarily expected that 2018 to win the World Series. I think we were kind of just relieved to make the playoffs, and it took the entire season to do it. Our manager got fired with like 11 days to go in the season. I mean, it was a weird year, and it was an awesome year. It was so cool to get back to the playoffs. It was a huge year in franchise history because it really did mark a turning point. That being said, I think that this year is bigger because we actually have a legitimate chance, I think, at winning the World Series. We've got the most wins in baseball. We've got home field advantage throughout the postseason. We also still needed to get a kind of a monkey off of our backs in the sense that we have been a very successful franchise since 2018, and yet we haven't really done much in the playoffs since 2018. And that, I think, was a really not only frustrating, but it was one of those things that I think that the franchise really had to win that series against the Cubs. And if we lose to the Dodgers, I'm obviously going to be disappointed. That being said, I am really glad, really, really glad that we won a series this year in the NLDS. I think that this erased a lot of ghosts, and do it against our biggest rival to me is huge. And I think that this, because of the chance that the Brewers have of going all the way or winning another pennant or whatever ends up happening in the next couple of weeks, I think that even just with the NLDS win, I think that the Brewers win against the Cubs is the bigger one in 2025 than in 2008.
That's a great answer, Vince. And yeah, so I guess my answer is going to actually be the most important one of the two. And again, the theme of getting a 26-year playoff drought monkey off our back in 2008 versus a 7-year playoff series winning monkey off our back here in 2025. I would say that I'm going to go with the 2008 one being more important, just because I think it ushered
Yeah.
in a new era of Milwaukee of winning baseball and expectations going
Yeah.
forward. However, I will say
Yep.
that the 2025 the loss would have been more crushing than if we would have lost in the last game of the season because of the expectation difference.
Yeah.
So in 2028, I think we were riding CC Sabathia. Again, there were some problems with the managing. Apologies and adios. But and such, as we went on the stretch there, I think just making the playoffs was a very cathartic. And I think anything after that was like, people were happy to, kind of be invited to the dance, so to speak. And after that, it was going to be gravy. And losing the Phillies sucked, but I mean, it wasn't like that was crushing. Uh,
Right.
so, so,
Right.
so here in 2025, we finished this year with the best record in baseball. We had a horrific playoff loss last year. We've been bouncing the wild card round for several years now, and we keep making the playoffs. Some of our windows have seemingly closed with players being left or traded. I mean, former Cy Young Award winner Corbin Burns left. We lost Willie Adames. We lost
Josh Hader, Devin
former
Williams.
best, awesome closers and Hader and Williams, and we've survived all of that, and we have this new young core of players going forward. And I think just it would continue that narrative that the Brewers are, great in the regular season and in their nice little fun little story, but in reality they can't win in September. So I'm sorry, they can't win in October, so they're irrelevant
Yeah.
moving forward. And I think a lot of the more casual Brewer fans would hang on to that narrative, like, I can, I can't get behind this team; they just can't win the playoffs. So I think that this was a would have been crushing to also lose to obviously the Cubs and continue on their season, especially after the whole Craig Counsell narrative.
Yeah.
Also, so I think this was a series we could not lose, and luckily we didn't. And again, I just had some quiet confidence going into that game five. In fact, my daughter Jessie woke up that morning and had no idea there was probably even a game that day, and she woke up and put on a Brewer shirt, and she only owns like two of them. So I knew woken up, I had a smile on my face that morning, and I'm like, okay, this is a good sign. Um, Me also refusing to play the song "Go Cubs Go" at the wedding I was DJing the previous night.
Yeah. That was
The
pretty
grooms,
clutch move.
the groom's
Yeah.
family was from Illinois, and I refused to play that song. So, and
No,
conversely,
honest to God, I would have walked out. I would have walked out and quit the gig if they would have insisted. Like that you
they
you
would have
made the absolute
demanded.
right decision.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh,
I would.
yeah.
Yep. So anyway, all that being said, like I said, unbelievable win, and I think Milwaukee, the entire city felt this, and now I'm not gonna say that whatever happens this point forward is going to be gravy because I think there's still high expectations for this team, and that it
Yeah.
all we have home and field advantage for all the rest of the playoffs, and I think that's huge, and we shouldn't squander that opportunity. And so I think that's the exciting thing going forward. And again, the job done by Murphy this season, just he's got to be manager of the year once again for the second year in a row. And
Absolutely.
again, this goes all the way to the top again. Like this organization has run supremely well. We can complain about Mark Antonasio not spending money as much as you want, but if you run a business well and you don't need to spend the money, then more power to you. I mean, if that's really the way you want to look at. So I mean, the bottom line is he didn't fork over the money to keep Counsell, and it looks like a blessing in disguise. Whether or not that was, a smart business move, not necessarily, however you want to chalk it up, but it's working out, and you got to give him credit for that. So real
Yeah.
quick.
No, I agree, and I think that you do talk, about spending money. I think that he's, I'm not the leader of the Mark Antonasio fan club, but I will say that he definitely has inaugurated a new mindset and a newer culture since he took over, from Wendy Seal and Preeb in 2005. And, I think that there is an expectation now that we're going to be not only competitive, but winning every year. And I think that that's a blessing. And, he's invested some money. And I think he's done it fairly smartly when it comes to, scouting analytics and then locking up key players for a long-term deal. And he's done it with Ryan Braun. He did it with Christian Yelich. And he's done it with Jackson Churio. Now, would I like to see him open up his pocketbook a little bit more and maybe, address some specific needs? Yeah, definitely. But I also am glad that we have an owner who doesn't, spend money just stupidly just to spend money and win the offseason like, the owners of the Padres have done, or the owners of, certain franchises have done. I guess Padres have had some, success with it, but you find other teams that are spending money just to spend money. I mean, look at the Mets. They didn't even make the postseason this year, and they've got the second highest payroll in baseball.
Yeah, and they've got our old GM David Stearns or whatever. So again, there's
Yep.
something about the culture that we've created here, and everyone keeps pointing out that the Brewers just missed, have made the playoffs 7 of the last 8 years of just missing that one by one game. And actually, if you look all the way back to 2017, we missed making the playoffs that year by only one game, the wild card too. So
Yeah.
you're talking about
Yep.
Council brought Murphy on as a bench coach in 2016, and of course we didn't make playoffs that year. But every other year, Murphy's been associated with this organization. The Brewers have either made the playoffs or missed by only one game. So that's a culture setting right there. And Murphy is absolutely 100% part of that equation. There's no denying it at this point. Um, so
No, totally agree. And you know what he's doing too is that, when Pat Murphy ends up not being the manager here, whenever he, retires or leaves, I don't think he's getting fired, obviously, anytime soon. But that is going to continue to percolate through the organization because he is creating a culture here as well in the manager's seat. And I think that is going to continue for quite some time, which is very exciting.
absolutely. So before we move on to our NLCS preview, here coming up with the Dodgers. Now the NLDS, before we, cap that off, and again, hopefully the Cubs fans enjoyed their ride home on Saturday night. Anyway,
Well, we
the
posted our Scotty's interns posted on social media, Craig. That not to interrupt, but they posted on Twitter and said hopefully Craig Counsell enjoys his drive back to Whitefish Bay.
oh yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely. So I did see the post game crossover with Counsell. He seemed very downtrodden, and one of the things, I just think, yeah. Again, he's not as good of an in-game manager, not as good of a manager as Pat Murphy, and I'm going to touch on that here in a second. But before we get to that,
Yeah.
there's no NLDS MVPs that are named or whatever. But another question that would probably be for a future Rap 9. Let's just throw it out there now to you, Vince. Who would be your NLDS MVP for the Milwaukee Brewers?
Okay, so 2 points on that. Number one, to answer your question directly, William Contreras is definitely my NLDS MVP. And then my second point, just as a aside with that, is that you and I had talked on our last podcast about sort of pitchers that might emerge in the NLDS or the postseason generally. And you said Miz and I said Chad Patrick. And I think that we were both absolutely right. I just want to say that.
Yeah, no, in fact, those are the two players I'm going to point out actually, because those are my top two candidates outside of Contreras Contreras and Vaughn, I think, on the offensive side, obviously, but I think the Miz would have to be a candidate for MVP of that just because I don't think any
Yeah.
Brewer fans had much expectations of of him. And then Patrick out of the bullpen was just, I mean, he's firing upper 90s and looks like it's almost, I don't want to be too, but it's almost like us adding Patrick to our bullpen is like almost on par with the Dodgers adding Sasaki to theirs. I mean, he's that dominant in the back end, and hopefully he can continue to
Yeah.
contribute, obviously. So both those guys, but I'm just gonna go with Miz
And,
because
and,
again,
and, and both rookies too, Craig. Both rookies and Chad Patrick. That was only his fourth appearance out of the bullpen all season, and he's doing it in the the postseason against the mighty Cubs. And that was really impressive.
yeah, and if you look at, I mean, the rookies, I don't, the rookies that we have on this team, and a lot of times when you have rookies, a lot of rookies on a team, that's not necessarily a recipe for going deep into the playoffs. But I mean, this team has got some really, really awesome rookies. You look at Miz, you got Patrick, you got Logan Henderson all on the pitching side of it, and then of course you have Isaac Collins, who is an unbelievable part of this team for most of the season, and probably will still finish top five in NL Rookie of the Year voting. And also in that same conversation, Caleb Durbin, I think, has had really solidify himself as a clutch player, and has got that third base job probably locked down moving forward. And again, he's just and again, again, I'm not probably the only Brewer fans that have been looking through Cubs either podcasts or threads during this series just to get their feedback on and the way that the Cubs fans really had this view of the Brewers is like, how are they doing this? We don't understand that these guys don't have talent. And someone actually referred to them, I think, as like Christian Yelich and the Seven Dwarfs, which made me laugh. But I mean, these guys are badlers, they're undersized, they're underappreciated, they're overlooked, and they play as a team. And like Contreras came out with that article in the Players Union, I think, where he said basically this is about unity. And he was on that team in the Braves when Ron Acuna went down for the season. They all, still stepped up and when ended up
The year they beat us. Yeah.
yeah, that's they went all the way, won the World Series even without their star
Yeah.
player. And this is the same
Mm.
type of team that the Brewers step up and unify when they're missing a player. We're missing Woodruff right now, or we missed Jackson Trio for almost a whole month, and the Brewers went on that amazing winning streak during that time period. So again, this is a team effort, and this is a great team built top to bottom, and that's why I think they're a danger in the postseason. And this is one of the most fun and magical Brewer teams in the franchise's 55-year history. Absolutely. So, all right.
Yep.
Oh, one other thing. I guess I was getting back to Murphy. Did you have anything to add, Spencer?
No, no, no. I would echo the comments that you said about this team, and I do think that it's special, even amongst the Brewers teams that have made the postseason. As you mentioned, we're 56 years now deep into franchise history, I think, and it's been few and far teams that have actually made the postseason for the Milwaukee Brewers. And I think, though, that even amongst those 11 teams, I think that this one stands a little bit apart, actually, as a pretty special team, kind of like the 1982 team in some ways. So I think we're going to look back on this team very fondly in a way that we don't necessarily think about teams like, the 2019 Brewers, for instance. We love that team, and we talk about that team, obviously, and we bring, guys like Moustakas back to events and whatever else. But I think that this team is going to kind of rank in the top tier amongst Brewers postseason teams in our franchise history. Whatever happens from here on out, I just think it's a very special group of guys, and
Oh, absolutely.
hopefully the building block. I mean, we've already had a building, these pieces in place, but hopefully this is the nucleus that not only gets us to a World Series, but that we're continuously seeing these types of results from in the seasons to come, even after this year as well.
And I like pointing out on the podcast many times, not only that we have those 5+ awesome rookies that I just mentioned of having great years, but we also currently have the best farm system according to Baseball America in baseball. So I mean, there's future success still on the way. We have a lot of our core Jackson Trio is locked up for a very long time, and the Miz is just starting his ascent into greatness, in my opinion. And a lot of these other guys are going to be awesome contributors too. Yeah, it's exciting time to be a Brewer fan. There's no doubt about that. So real quick, back and of course this is definitely one of the best Brewer teams of all time. I mean, obviously it's hard to eclipse the '82 team, but there's something about the '82 team, and again, that have made them, endearing for decades upon decades, and not only just because that was the drought here for the Brewers, but there was something about that team. And again, I was like an 8-year-old kid at the time they made it in the World Series or whatever. But there was something about that team that just they were almost like caricatures of themselves. As a kid, they were very appealing to a young kid because they were almost like cartoon characters. I mean, you had Raleigh Fingers with the mustache. You had the two young awesome players, Rockin' Robin and the Igniter Paul Molitor, and then you had the big burly Pete Vukovich and Gorman Thomas with the big guts and not necessarily athletic physiques or whatever, and they were almost like cartoonish like characters. As we saw, Pete Vukovich actually started Major League as an actual character, and up and down the lineup they were like that. And so you had the gray hair like Don Sutton in the rotation, all this. So I mean, yeah, there was something about that team that just like they were almost like cartoon characters. And I have a feeling there's something about this team that they're just like a bunch of friends hanging out playing baseball or something like that, almost like Sam like level about the 2025 Brewers. And like you said, or like I said, with the unity thing where they're playing as a team, it's
Yeah.
something they enjoy playing together and they have each other's backs, and it's just awesome to see. So.
Yeah, and it's not a model that you necessarily need, because there's been teams in baseball history that have won a lot of games that actually hated each other off the field. I mean, you look back at the 1970s Oakland Athletics. I read a book about those guys recently, and they hated each other. And even great teams like the 1920s Yankees, Ruth and Gehrig didn't get along for many years. And it's a different model, and I think that it's more fitting to Milwaukee as a city and as a market to have a model like what we're seeing now than to have some of those other examples. I don't know if the 70s A's would have worked in Milwaukee. I just don't. I don't know that. Like, yes, they were characters, and yes, they had some really interesting players, and yes, they had some obviously a lot of talent. They won 3 world championships, but I think that that model may not have worked in Milwaukee. So I think that what really stands out to me about this team and the '82 team and other really successful teams in franchise history have been that they not only gelled or whatever on the field, but that they sort of match their team's character to the character of the city that they play in. I think that this is a very Milwaukee group of guys, even though, most of the guys are not from Milwaukee. It still is I think Danny Jansen is the only guy from Wisconsin on the team at this point, but you still have a group of guys that have very much played and fit their team into the city and the market that they play in. And I think that that's pretty cool. I think that to me is the difference.
And exactly, and times have changed too since the 1980s. Like obviously it's still Brew City or whatever, but in the 1980s, like Harvey's Wallbangers, they literally were a team that was known as like these beer guzzling. And again, they literally were guys that hung out together at bars, as we've seen documented
And
or whatever. So
did you see that? Did you see that trash can after after the game on Saturday? I'm pretty sure that these guys are still drinking their fair share of beer.
exactly, yeah. So. Okay, so before moving on, I just want to say one other thing as someone who's got younger kids, like I almost would love to take a parenting class taught by Pat Murphy because this is a guy who knows how to handle young players and young people, so to speak. And he actually is still a father himself, as he sees usually as his kids his boys at his press conferences and stuff like that, which I think is cool. But the bottom line is there's something about his handling of the Miz in particular that's just masterful because he sets him up to allow him to have growth. And this is a trait that I think Pat Murphy has that Craig Counsell did not. No offense to him, but I felt that if he was handling the Miz, he would just be throwing him out there to start game three of any of these series or whatever, which is not necessarily maybe the wrong move, but Murph is literally looking at these guys long term and like what's best for the growth. And so it's from my understanding that he does not have, he's had very little conversation with Mizrowski about his role coming up. It's almost like he's purposely left it ambiguous to him, and seeing what he would do with the situations he throws him out there with, and he absolutely excelled here in the NLDS as we all saw. And there's just something about that, like how, and I think that I was kind of mystified at how he was handling Craig Yoho during this season because I thought he'd be a contributor to this team as a rookie this year, and he failed a little bit when he came out the big leagues, and he immediately just was like done with him. And again, I think it was something to actually help in the development of Craig Yoho. I hate to say it, where there's something about humbling a player who's has all the talent in the world, and to make them go back and be like, hey, look, I'm not doing my best. I've not found my best self yet. Of course, my talent allows
Yeah.
me to compete against these guys, but I've not found my best set. Yeah, I still have some growing to do. I still have some learning to do, and all that stuff. And so I think that Murph is a master at this. Obviously, being a former college coach at the two programs at Notre Dame and Arizona State University, like he's obviously worked and had lots of experience with young players. And I think that obviously the Brewers have a lot of young players on this team as we went over all the rookies. Jackson Trio himself is not a veteran, but he's
Well,
only
that's what
21.
I was going to say. No, that's what I was going to say, Craig. He's
Yeah.
even done that with Trio, and he puts Trio in his place. I mean, Trio is obviously a budding superstar, and he has a long-term contract, and he was the number one prospect in the Brewer system for several years, going into his major league debut in 2024. And Trio, I love the quotes from Murphy. You talk about putting someone in your place. It's almost like the Army model, where you break somebody down just to build them back up to a better version of themselves.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of what boot camp is for. I think that Murphy sort of runs things like a drill sergeant in some ways. I mean, but to the Churio point, I think that he's got he made a comment about Churio that when the Brewers had won 14 straight games in August and Churio wasn't a part of any of that. Churio, the reporters were asking, our colleagues were asking Murphy about Churio's return day. He's like, whenever he comes back, it's fine. We're winning without him. So I tell him that every day. And I'm like, he's like telling our biggest superstar outside of Christian Yelich that we don't really need him. I just think that that's funny to put a kid like that in his place a little bit. So
Yeah.
I enjoy that he does that with a lighter touch. He uses humor to convey a serious message, which is it's not about you, it's about the team.
Exactly. And I think he's even masterful of handling some of the veterans. I mean, even if you look at, I think that he actually pushes, I don't think Christian Yelich is a natural, you can just tell by his like California, laid back persona. It's not necessarily a natural born leader, but I think he's grown into that. And I think that Murphy even pushes him toward that in a subtle ways where he like defaults to him or whatever, and almost is like forcing him to become a leader or whatever. So all this is just all parts. There's so many nuances of being a great manager or a great mentor or any of that stuff. And all I have to say before we move on to the next segment is that I'm fully on board with the fact that Pat Murphy has all the love and respect from all of his players, and that's really what you need as a starting point, and that he's allowing this team to grow together. And it's something really cool to see. And I love it. There's nothing more entertaining than than Pat Murphy, his post game pressers, and even just the way that he, very frankly answers questions for the press. Whereas he never really gets annoyed. And again, this is something back to, oh, I'll say back 20 years when we actually had locker room passes, and you'd get in there asking Ed Yost questions. He just seemed like he hated you. He didn't want to answer your questions. All your questions were dumb. He's just completely annoyed at all of it. And Craig Counsell has a little bit of that same air to him in his post game pressers, in my opinion. And Pat Murphy has none of that. Like he's just like holding court. He's basically a straight shooter, which I love or whatever. And he's not pulling any punches or just saying anything for. He's not worried about sound bites, saying that. He's just a real dude. And with a young team at the helm of a young team, and it's just awesome to see. And all the kudos coming his way. He's not there for the kudos. He's there to be a leader of this team. He's doing an awesome job. So
We do still have press passes, though, right? You said.
we'll have to check on that. I think Scott's interns are still working on that. They've been, I guess, having a little bit of problem with that. But anyway, all
Yeah.
right. So NLCS preview here coming up. I guess for starters, the NLDS rosters. We're taping this at our 11 a.m. here on the game one of the NLCS. But they have not been announced yet, right? Is there anything you're expecting surprise-wise as far as the who's going to make the NLCS roster for the Brewers?
Yeah, I think that we're going to add some length, to our bullpen. I would actually the biggest surprise. Well, I'm going to project that Tobias Myers makes the second iteration of our postseason roster. I think that he's going to be added. If I had to go with another pitcher that I think could possibly be added, and I could be way off here, it would be Eric Fetty. He had some success with the Brewers. I don't know if it's necessarily the right call, but he's a veteran. He's got some that's in Milwaukee over the last 5-6 weeks, and he's I think got some postseason experience as well. So he might be a guy that I could foresee us adding. So I would say those two guys are fairly likely. And the one guy on the offensive side is Reese. We really didn't use our bench. I was looking kind of through some of our notes, and we used Bowers, but we didn't ever use like Andrew Monasterio in the NLDS. There was Danny Jansen never got into a game, I don't think.
No.
Obviously you got a backup catcher, but you could kind of add some power to your bench by activating Reese. If you thought that he was a little hot, I don't know. So I would say on the offensive side, most likely would be Reese, and on the pitching side, Tobias and number one and Fetty number two if we're going to activate somebody new.
I do agree that they'll probably at least see two new players added to the roster, which means two are going to have to come off. Before I make my predictions, who are your predictions on who might have to come off the roster then that was on the NLDS roster?
Well, that's the thing, because I think you still need a backup infielder. Monasterio can play, three different spots. So I don't actually know. Like, it could be a straight up Bowers for Hoskins thing, but that really limits you because they're both Vaughn and Hoskins are both right-handed. So I don't know that we would necessarily want to do that. And I think that Murphy really likes having Bowers. So I don't think Bowers is going anywhere. I don't think Perkins is going anywhere either. And the one guy I could see coming off is actually Isaac Collins. And I don't know why, but he's versatile and he's got speed. So I'm not necessarily advocating for this, but I would say that we're a little thicker in the outfield, and you could put Bowers out there if you really needed to. So I would say if you really wanted a power bat, you could replace Collins with Hoskins.
I do agree that either Collins or Lockridge, one of those two are probably likely to come off in lieu of a pitcher.
Yeah, yeah. Lockridge. Yeah, I should have mentioned Lockridge as well.
But two hints at this, and I'm sure that Brewer fans, thank you for listening. That this is already probably settled by the time you're even listening to this. But there's been some hints dropped already by Murphy that Logan Henderson's actually a possible addition option, and also there was speculation that fans are speculating, media, that the Brewers are probably, instead of going to 14 hitters, 12 pitchers like they did in the NLDS, since the length of this, that they'd probably go 13, 13, 13 or whatever. But in reality,
Yeah.
the rumor now is that the Brewers are going to stick with the 14 hitters, 12 pitchers, which leads me to believe that they probably have to take out um,
Gasser
they'd have to take
or
out
take
some
out.
short-term relievers for guys that can have more length. And
Well, what
also,
about Gasser though? Because he got, I feel like Gasser could possibly be left off just because he wasn't necessarily fully built up after his injury, and I know he did some yeoman's work in coming in a bad situation against the Cubs, and he saved some innings for our pen, which made some guys available in Game 5. So this is no real indication of his efforts or anything in the NLDS, but I could see Gasser coming off too. Now that I think about it.
yeah, no, yeah. So there's we'll see how it shakes out, but I guess my guess is that we might even consider taking off Grant Anderson, who did a really good job, and one of either Lockridge or Collins. I guess my official prediction will be probably Grant Anderson comes off for someone who can throw more innings like a Myers or a Henderson, and that
Yeah.
we'd probably leave on Gasser only the fact that he's lefty and we've got the Otani, Freddie Freeman issue and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And not only that, but Gasser can give more length than Grant Anderson. So, I mean, I think Mears could also be a possible, but I think that we'd probably take off Grant. I'm gonna guess Grant Anderson and I'll just go officially Grant Anderson and Lockridge to come off.
Yeah.
And that
Those are
I'll
great
guess
bets.
that
You might definitely be right.
I'll guess Logan Henderson and both Logan Henderson and Tobias Meyer get added then. And there's even some
Wow.
people like, what about Brob's script? And the only reason I'm thinking this is if you guys all watched the epic Friday night game between the basically elimination game for both game 5, Mariners versus Tigers, it went 15 innings. And again, they don't have the phantom runner on second rule for the postseason here. And
Thank
so
God.
so the problem though with that is the fact that if there's a 15 inning game in the middle of this series, there'd be major problems if we don't have guys that can give some length. And so you almost need like a sacrificial Tobias Myers to throw 4 or 5 innings in a situation like that. So I think because of those issues, I think you almost have to add guys, especially. And of course, everyone probably already knows the news. Woodruff will not be part of the NLCS. He would have been an awesome
Yeah.
option, but hopefully,
Yeah.
it's just so unfortunate. But anyway, so with that being said, let's talk about what do we think the pitching plans are if you're here for the first couple games of this series and maybe even throughout games 1 and 2 here opening up in Milwaukee as far as
Well,
starting pitching goes.
just the way that the NLDS went, and because of that built-in travel, you've actually got some guys who did build up some normal rest. Like we didn't get overused, I guess is my point. So I know he had a rough start in the LDS. I would start Quinn Priester. I still have a lot of faith in Quinn. He pitched great during the regular season. And I heard from our anonymous source, Tom Carter, who works for the Brewers, and he mentioned that Quinn is ready to go. He had a bad start against the Cubs, but that happens. And he got pulled right away, though. He didn't throw a ton of pitches, just overall. It was almost like a bullpen day for him. So I think Quinn Priester is going to be locked and loaded. I think he's going to have a great NLCS.
And then, Freddie Peralta will be, I agree with that. Freddie Peralta will be on regular rest for game 2. And whether or not, do you think that the Brewers, obviously Michael Busch was like the big thorn in the side for the
Yeah,
Brewers, the entire, and not only
yeah.
the first inning narrative and the Michael Busch narrative for the Cubs, and we somehow traverse that almost magic or almost, masterfully. And so do
And
you think
Council
that,
helped us too by putting in Justin Turner. I think one of the games, like it's kind of like Bush's numbers against lefties are not great, but it's kind of a myth that he can't hit lefties. I mean, he still can hit lefties at times, and I still think that power threat is real. So I'm glad that Craig Counsell overmanaged himself in the starting Justin Turner.
no, it was like a chess match, and I was at that game, of course, so I was more than happy to look up when I got to the stadium and look up and see Justin Turner leading off.
I
Um,
know he was 1 for 2. I know he was 1 for 2, and Turner didn't have like a bad game or anything, but he did not lead off the game with anything, and his hit came in his second at bat. So again, I think that sometimes Craig Tober is real as much as we talked about Craig Timber back when he was a Brewers manager. I'm pretty happy with how he manages in October now that he's managing the Cubs.
Exactly. Um, but do you think, I guess the one thing, do you think that that Murphy will play around with the opener so much with Otani, obviously the Dodgers leadoff hitter, and he's left-handed, obviously. The best player not only of the in the league, but probably of the entire generation. It's a little scary to think that the other team has that. But with that being said,
Yeah.
he's also hits lefties fairly well. Do you think that
Yeah.
they'll just go back to traditional, we're starting this guy, or almost every game
I,
besides maybe Peralta start again, dink around with possible left-handed openers?
I don't think that it's necessarily based on the lefty thing with Otani because he's so talented. He can hit righties and lefties, and I don't think there's any, you know, many weak spots in his armor, so to speak. But that being said, I do think that Murphy likes to give the opponent something to think about and kind of mess with them a little bit. And I almost think that just from a psychological perspective that he might. And honestly, Lena and I were talking about this, and she was, astutely saying, this is really funny just to watch Pat because he's clearly like pressing Craig's buttons, like, by some of the moves that he's making and just the way that he starts the game with a reliever. I mean, Deb McGill start, I think, was a brilliant move in Game 5 on Saturday. So I know that I know that Murphy is capable of that, and I think that it could very well happen. And I think that the Dodgers hate stuff like that, quite frankly, because they don't really have a ton of holes in their roster, so they don't really need to do stuff like this. But I could see that. I could see Murphy starting a reliever, not necessarily based on the lefty thing. And you could start a guy like, Kana gives you length, so I don't know if I would go with him. So I would say you could start a lefty just to mess with them. I don't necessarily think it's based on matchup. I wouldn't do it on Ready Day necessarily, but I would say it could happen.
Yeah, no,
Or
I agree with
it's
you.
a series.
Probably, I'm not guessing game one. I think he's going to just go with Priester game one and Peralta game two, and then starting with games three and four because we don't have a lockdown, you know, starter. I do think the Miz will be a bulk starter in
Yeah,
games three or
yeah,
four, and that Quintana will be the other bulk starter in either games three or four, and then I think that game five would go
yeah,
if necessary, we'll go back to Priester, and then game six, Freddie, and then all hands on deck for game seven. I think that's kind of the plan. And I agree.
yeah. And
We're
don't
probably,
forget that Miz dominated the Dodgers in his one start against them this season too. I mean, not to say that you can always replicate that and things can change and you guys can get different reads for sure. But I do think that the Miz has proven that he can play well against the Los Angeles Dodgers.
and my hope is that he's given a bulk role in game three, so that he's available for a bulk role in game seven, and then we go Quintana in game four. But that's just how I'd play it out. I really I think Miz is a supremely talented pitcher, and that the talent will show through in postseason series like that, in spite of his youth or whatever. So I know a lot of
Yeah,
people.
I know Brandon's not a huge fan, but yeah, I agree.
Well, again, he went through his last outing with no walks, and I think that's the big bugaboo. Every run means so much, and every base runner, even in the postseason, and you don't want to just be giving away free ones. But I think Miz is going to step up his game, because this is all part of his growth. And again, this will help him in future postseasons, whatever, if he goes through any type of tribulations this year, or whatever. I think we need to show some faith in him, but we'll see how it all plays out. But I agree. I think Prenquister. Quinn Priester, did I say that right? Yeah, will bounce
I think so.
back
Yeah,
big time. Like that was obviously an anomaly against the Cubs. He was pitching his home, home. He's from the Chicago area or whatever,
yeah.
and so yeah, so it was just one of those things where, I think he'll bounce back big time, hopefully tonight. And again, the Dodgers are a formidable opponent. There's no question denying that. If you look
Oh
at
yeah,
the first three hitters in their lineup are all like future Hall of Famers, and possibly, well, you start with the best player of the generation, possibly in the history of baseball, outside Babe Ruth, and that's uh, Otani, obviously, and then you've got Betts, who's amazing, and then Freddie Freeman, but then after that, I mean, Teoscar Hernandez is a pretty good hitter, but he's got some holes in his swing, and up and down. I think I'm not sure about the full health of Will Smith. They don't have Chris Taylor,
yeah.
the Brewer killer, anymore. They've got a bunch of fringe players in the other parts of the roster, and I really think that combined with their weakish bullpen, who's unfortunately been saved by Sasaki coming back and being a lockdown end of the high leverage end of the game reliever for them here. But yeah, and I think some of their starting pitching depth will help them with, like, using guys almost like they have a similar situation where I think they're going to use their four, five, six starters with bulk roles, bulk inning roles for a lot of the playoff games. So this is going to be a
Yeah.
battle. I really foresee this going 6 or 7 games, which means most likely going to come back to Milwaukee, and with the World Series on the line. And then there's nothing more exciting about that. I think this is going to be a battle all the way to back and forth. And again, I don't know if you saw Jeff Passan's article that came out today, but he actually said that this is actually a series that could actually, portend into the labor agreement coming up or whatever, where it's an argument.
Yep.
It's an argument about what, the David versus Goliath as far as it comes to spending and whether or not a salary cap is needed in MLB and so yeah it's going to be it's this is the dynamics of this series are just pretty amazing and I think that in some ways this is kind of like the best two teams left. The lack of respect that
Well,
they
and to be clear, the Dodgers are a really good team. They won 93 games this year. The Brewers did win 97 though. So we are matching up against a quality opponent who I think is, obviously they're experienced in the postseason. They're the defending world champions until they're not. So, we have to go into this series. I think considering ourselves the underdog in some ways, just because again they've got the trophy, and I do think that we can beat them. We did beat them in the regular season. But I am I don't think that we're 6-0 good against the Dodgers in terms of what's going to happen
no
in the series. I think it is going to be very close, and we have to respect their talent and all that stuff, and not go into the series, too cocky, but also not thinking that we can't match up either. And I do think their bullpen is their weak spot, even with Sasaki. I think that is their weak spot. I think that I unfortunately Teoscar Hernandez always seems to step up in the postseason. I'd have Scotty's interns look up his postseason numbers. But I don't know those off the top of my head, but it just seems like that guy just is always on base or hitting a big home run, or making a great catch in the postseason. So, I'm not going to take his bad year as any indicator of what could happen this week. So we got to be careful about him and not just looking past him, which I think other teams have done, just given the other guys in the Dodgers lineup. So yeah, it's going to be a tough trek, and I think it's going to be a great series, and both teams are really talented, and um, it'd be fun. I hope that the Dodgers come into Milwaukee kind of underestimating us and have that big city mentality where, they kind of view Milwaukee as this, Major League Baseball backwater or whatever else, teams have said about us in the past. What did Casey Stengel say about Milwaukee? He called it Bushville in the 1957 World Series. And I think that can happen, for a team like the Dodgers. So I'm hopeful that they come in cocky and look past how good the Brewers really are, and that gives us a little bit of an advantage. So who knows? We'll see. And I'm sure Dave Roberts will have his guys prepared, but maybe that's a little weak spot as well.
And MLB Network came out with just yesterday like some power rankings of teams left. They had the Dodgers first and the Brewers fourth, which again, okay, fine, we're underdogs again. I don't know. We finished the best record in baseball. Apparently, no one noticed that, or even if they did, they're writing us off as just getting lucky or what. And so again, I think we'll wear that underdog mentality on our sleeve. That's totally fine. And again, I think that the what we did earn with an awesome regular season, the best record in baseball, is home field advantage throughout the playoffs, including this series, which I think is going to be huge. You saw how Milwaukee came out and supported this team. Los Angeles, even though I was at Game 6 of the NLCS in 2008 when the Brewers did win that game, but there were a lot of Dodger fans there, and so it won't be like
In
taking
20 in
over.
2018, yeah, 2018,
What did I
not
say?
2008.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah,
2018. Yeah, 2018.
yeah,
The
yep.
decade that just
Just don't want to confuse our listeners.
mixed up at the time. 2018 for most of our listeners who are alive for that. The Dodgers fans did kind of show up, but not anywhere near in the same force as the Cubs. So I think the home field advantage will be huge. I think it's going to come into play here in Game 6 or 7. I think there's going to be an awesome, magical finish to this series. We'll see. But yeah, no, very excited about it. Oh, one other little an analytical thing I'm going to throw out there because I think the Brewers are a team that are based off the analytics. I mean, you look all the way back to Moneyball, where these small market teams had to start analyzing the market inefficiencies and all that stuff and exploit that. And the Tampa Rays also did that to some success. And obviously, the Brewers are kind of on that same tree of analytics. And there's one thing that came out, even though I mentioned Shohei Ohtani is really good against left-handers, apparently he does not hit very well against left-handed pitchers that have less than a 38-inch arm angle. And two Brewer lefties.
Oh yeah, Chris Hook is going to exploit that.
Jared Koenig has a 31-inch arm angle, and Robert Gasser has a 28-inch arm angle. And so that's why I think both those guys will be on the roster and possibly play huge in this series. So again, just throwing out a little nugget of information I found out there. But I mean, the bottom line is Ohtani is a huge looming legendary figure in this and could
Yeah,
single-handedly turn. And again, he's going to pitch too. I mean, I should not even fail to mention that. I mean, this guy's amazing. He's going to pitch at some point in this series too, most likely in LA. But yeah, so I mean,
Yeah, the
he
dude
is a
is.
big X factor.
Yeah, no, he's a machine. I mean, he's got 55 home runs this year. Had 54 last year. He's a machine. Do you think that there's anything to the idea that the Dodgers could get complacent because they have won a World Series last year? Like, I don't know how that would factor in my own thinking. I don't think it necessarily would, but if you're playing for the Dodgers and you've already won it, and you've got a ring, do you think that can play a fact? I'm not going to say play a factor, but do you think that like the hunger is still there to win another one if you're, Max
Well,
Muncy or some won one last year?
to answer your question, I think part of the awesome part of Pat Murphy's philosophy is that he always likes to surround himself with hungry players, and I think he really
Yeah,
thinks young players are very hungry, and also people that have have something to prove, something to win, and play together, and they play hungry. So to answer your question, if are the Dodgers a hungry team? They're a
yeah, that's
well-paid
what
team. They're a successful
I'm.
team. Um, there's also some karma that's going to be against them. If you're not a Los Angeles Dodgers fan or a Tiny fan, I don't know why you wouldn't be rooting for the Milwaukee Brewers, even if you're not a Milwaukee Brewer fan. So I think collectively that
Probably just Cubs fans. Probably just Cubs fans. I've seen a lot of Cubs fans online saying that they're cheering for the Dodgers this series because they hate us so much.
okay, besides Cubs and Dodgers fans, everyone else who likes to watch baseball, even casually, is going to be rooting on the Milwaukee Brewers. I think that there's something
Yep.
to that. And then it's a hungry team. That it is. We're more, so to answer your question, I don't know that the Dodgers will be complacent. They're still supremely talented, but I think the Brewers are more hungry, and I think they have home field. The Brewers have home field advantage. They've proven they can beat the Dodgers, and they're more hungry. So I think that's a great recipe for success. Whether how this actually plays out, will
Yeah.
happen on the field, and hopefully we can both be there to see all of it. So this is going to be very exciting. I've never been more fired up about any postseason series ever, and I think this is going to be a great one. So hopefully,
Yeah, I do too. I think it'll be a lot of fun, and I think that the Brewers have positioned themselves really well to recapture some of that momentum that we had at the beginning of the NLDS. Coming out strong in the first two games was awesome, and then to be able to come back after getting punched in the face, actually, in games 3 and 4, and winning then that series and getting that monkey off of our back, I think is huge. And that to take us back to the beginning of our podcast, that's why I answered the way that I did about the 2025 Brewers Cubs matchup being, in my opinion, even greater, than the 2008 one, as awesome as that was. So I don't know. I think that it's a pretty special team, and no matter what happens in this NLCS, it's been fun to watch. It's full of drama. It's full of excitement. It's just been exciting, and it's pretty cool because I'm getting a lot of texts from people that are friends of mine from different parts of my life, over the years, like
yeah.
who are baseball fans generally, but not Brewer fans, and they're all texting me about the Brewers. It's like just exciting to think that the Brewers are actually kind of top of mind for people who are at all interested in baseball.
No, and I agree with the same thing. Obviously, I think for both you and me, not just because of this podcast or the show that we've done for over 20 years, both of you, since our youth, have had Brewers ingrained in our DNA, and all of our family, friends, anyone who knows us knows that about us. And you can't think of either Vince or Craig and not think of the Milwaukee Brewers as some form of
Oh,
attachment
true.
to our
Yeah.
images, which is it's interesting. But anyway, so yeah, that no, I agree that I'm getting texts from random people saying, Brewers was thinking of you and all this stuff. It's like, okay, cool, yeah. So
Yeah.
um,
I got one from an old college friend that was like praying for a Mariners Brewers World Series. That sounds good to me, man. Let's do
well,
it.
no, absolutely. And again, it's like you have to
Guy's a
realize that
Twins
there's
fan.
these storylines of like franchises that have never won, and you get people to root for you because of that. People like to see the end of long misery is something that people that don't have anything invested in as a fandom and still love baseball like
Yeah.
to kind of hang their hat on, and I think. The 2025 Milwaukee Brewers are not only a great team, a magical team, but they're a fun team to root for, I feel, because of the way that they play the game. And so
Yeah.
it's not just the 3-run homer team, like the Earl Weavers, Orioles, or something like that. But it's someone that is great at manufacturing runs with guys that are overachieving in a lot of people's minds. So that's a fun team to root for, in my opinion. Even if I wasn't.
Well, back in 2020, 22, Craig, it was, what was the phrase? Bucks in six. I'll maybe say Brewers in six. I'll take that. That'll be my official prediction.
Brewers in six. All right, here we go. Yeah, no,
Yep.
and hopefully you can come up and partake in any festivities beyond Game 6 of this series and into the next one, because I'll definitely look forward to having you part of that as well up here in Milwaukee. So we'll see
Yeah,
how it
man,
plays
I'm
out.
gonna try. We've got we're going to Louisiana this week for some stuff, and I will have to leave a little bit early to get up there in time for Game 6. If that were to happen, I don't know that that's going to happen or not. So I may just come up, for the World Series, but I'm going to try. So we'll hopefully be up there for Game 7 to celebrate.
Awesome. All right, cool. All right, well, thanks for tuning in, Brewer fans. I don't know, there's not much to add other than hopefully you can get out to AmFam Field and enjoy this team and root them out and get behind them and your full support. And then hopefully we're coming at you in about just over a week with maybe a preview of the next series, which will
Yep.
be our first ever podcast preview of that type of series. I'm not going to mention it by name, but it'll be very exciting. Hopefully that's
Yep.
something that can happen. So, all right, well, let's lock
Craig,
in.
did we get any? Do we have any indicator on Scotty? Is he over under was one on attending a postseason game? What is he currently at?
He's still under, I believe.
Okay.
He's under on the half game, even though I think if we make it to the next round, he's looking to go on. I, we'll see. It's a possibility to make the
Okay.
over, but yeah,
Wow.
I forgot what was mine set at. Was it mine at 3.5, three games?
Yours was at four over under. Yeah.
Oh crap. Okay, so this
I,
tonight
I
will be
picked
my
I picked the over. I
tonight
picked the
will be
over
my
for you.
only my second game. So I'm
Wow.
hoping. I think the fact that we've extended into this series bodes well to me, at least evening up on my over under. And then if we make the next series, I'll hope to go over it for sure. So anyway,
Okay.
so all right, stay classy, Illinois, and go Brewers.
But don't forget to pay your tolls. Go Brewers. Do, 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 do.